Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a Mel Brooks showdown when I put Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles against Mel Brooks's Robin Hood Men in Tights. And this one was a hard one to pick because like both these movies are really funny, and of course Mel Brooks, one of the greatest comedy directors, probably the best at doing parodies and stuff. So let's just dive right on into the nit and the picky here. First up, we have Blazing Saddles, directed by Mel Brooks, and of course they had a bevy of other writers. Richard Pryor was one of the writers on the film and everything. And basically what Blazing Saddles is just, it's a parody on the Western genre. And what's beautiful about Blazing Saddles is not just a parody on Westerns, but it's also a parody on racism in general and stuff. So we have Cleavon Little that plays Bart, and he ends up, they're going to hang him, but they're also trying to get the railroad's going to go through the town of Rock Ridge, and they want to take over the town. Hedley Lamar, played fucking hilariously by Harvey Korman, who, of course, was always funny. And or Slim Pickens is in it. He's like his little fucking henchman and stuff. And, so what they do is a way to like make that town tank. They get this black sheriff played by Cleavon Little. And, of course, the townspeople, they're just as fucked up. A black sheriff, they all lose their damn shit and stuff. And, his only friend is the drunk, played by Gene Wilder, who kind of, in a way, a little bit of a parody of Dean Martin, Rio Bravo. And, so they kind of, but once, like, dude gets rid of Mongo, big hulking motherfucker, and like, once they realize this dude can actually do shit for him, they fuck with him, which is yet again another like hilarious parody on racism and stuff. They don't like you until you can do something for you type shit, And of course, like, fucking Hedley Lamar, they always get his fucking name wrong and shit. The film itself is like just full of like just endless fucking crazy gags and stuff. And especially that end gag where like that fight sequence when they fake them out when they're going to try to ransack the town, and they build the fake town and shit, and it all erupts in a brawl and stuff, and then that transfers over to the other side of the Warner lot where they're filming some fruity ass musical directed by Dom DeLuise and stuff, and they end up getting fighting with them motherfuckers and shit, and then it goes into the fucking the lunchroom and shit, and all the way out, and then, a lot of fourth wall breaking, and they're watching the movie at the premiere at the theater and stuff. It's just a pretty wild shit, man. Of course, and, Cleavon Little is exceptional. Madeline Kahn in a clear reference to Marlena Dietrich in the Westerns that she was in and stuff. And really just her persona in general. And of course, Madeline Kahn, the fucking smoke show in this. And they use her to try to, like, fuck with Cleavon Little, but like then he ends up like fucking her so good that like she's all fucking love struck and everything. And and also like Gene Wilder, really fucking shines in this one. And of course, like him and Cleavon Little have great chemistry and stuff. And even like the side characters, like I said, Slim Pickens and his crew, they're fucking that whole scene, the fire around the fire, they're eating beans and just ripping ass like a motherfucker. I mean, that's real shit though. I mean, motherfuckers eat that much goddamn beans, they're gonna be putting off some fucking gas. But like I said, the film, it all, really like kind of pokes fun of the mindset of the time. Like Mel Brooks is the fucking governor of that state, that he's fucking hilarious. There's a lot of like fucking, and also the beautiful thing is it plays like a real movie. It's like if you know anything about Westerns and shit, most of the plots are pretty fucking basic. And, this one has like that basic Western plot that you just throw a few racial undertones and stuff. And, then you got like, it's a great fucking movie, masterpiece. Then we move forward to Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is another Mel Brooks parody. And this time he takes a stab at the Robin Hood mythology, which is a fucking story that's been done in movies to death almost as much as the fucking Western and shit. Here we have Carrie Ewells, who plays Robin Hood. And honestly, Carrie Ewells does a great job because he plays it straight. And it's beautiful, And of course, you got Dave Chappelle as Achu, or I think that was some weird fucking sneeze thing. And then he helped, and then they got all kinds of other fucking side characters. The guy playing the fucking sheriff, that dude's like a proper prick, fucking little faux Alan Rickman looking motherfucker. And, there's a lot of good, like, sight gags in it, but a lot of the fucking humor in it is very, like, predictable. You kind of see some of this shit coming a mile away, and it's not really as like I wouldn't say highbrow, I wouldn't even say like Blazing Saddles is that highbrow, but it had a little more substance than Robin Hood Men in Tights, you know. But the film itself is very well done. I mean, that opening is pretty fucking great. You know, the fucking the opening. Every time they make a Robin Hood movie, they burn our village down. You know, it's pretty fucking funny. And then the whole the hands in the fucking dungeon thing and flipping them off on the way back, and you know, there's just a lot of like funny thing. Isaac Hayes pops up in this at the beginning and shit, and you know, Dom DeLuise has a small part in it. Of course, Patrick Stewart comes in the end as King Richard. That's pretty fucking wild and stuff. There's a lot of interesting gags and stuff, like, you know, the fat chick was gonna jump on the horse and the horse, fuck that shit, you know. It's like, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like you kind of compare a director, you know, in their, you know, in the earlier in the career and then later in the career. I wouldn't say that he loses any of his luster, you know, later in, you know, but the film itself, I mean, granted, it's a parody, so to say it was too silly is kind of fucking stupid, you know, but it just kind of has the sense where it's like it doesn't feel like, you know, a real movie, you know, whereas like Blazing Saddles does and stuff. So this is where we get down to the real nit and picky type shit, you know, because like the thing about it is like Blazing Saddles has a lot of laughs in it that you wouldn't expect to come from. With Robin Hood Men in Tights, you kind of guess the laughs before you know, all the gags and shit and what they're gonna do, and you know, very like, you know, I don't know what toilet humor, I guess you could call it, you know. And I mean, granted, Blazing Saddles had that, but it just feels like there was a lot more. And it could be just the subject matter, because westerns are very easy to make fun of, whereas like, and Robin Hood's easy to make fun of too. But even that source material is kind of lame, you know. But they've been making this shit, you know, probably since even before Errol Flynn like donned the fucking tights and fucking made it fucking iconic and shit. But you know, Mel Brooks does a good job of making fun of this shit, because like I said, it's real easy to make fun of. But I gotta pick Blazing Saddles for this round, because like I said, it's just the better movie, you know. And I honestly think, like, even if we're going off of laughs per minute, I'd say they're about even. Like, Blazing Saddles might be slightly ahead when it comes to laughs per minute, but I mean, you know, Robin Hood Men in Tights can hold its own as far as the laugh factor goes, you know, because I laughed more than a few times at this film. But like I said, most of the gags are pretty basic, and you know, I wouldn't even say like later in his career he lost luster, but it got to a point where, like, you know, he was kind of running out of shit to make fun of, basically. But like I said, everybody in the cast is great, but it's just it doesn't compare to Blazing Saddles. So for anybody keeping score, that's 47-40. 70s are up by 7. They're fucking getting that. They're getting that gap wider and stuff. They're taking their lead back as far as going further and further. You know, because I mean, the 70s, they had like this classics on classics on classics, and not just shit that like iconic, but shit that's just fucking great. Because whereas like with Blazing Saddles, there's also like a really good social commentary to it that isn't overshadowed by it never gets away from the comedy. Like, you're laughing at shit, but there's also a real background to it. And so whereas like Robin Hood Men in Tights is just kind of like just fucking silly ass joking and shit, where it's like you know, it's just fucking the world, you know. Because it's what's funny about Blazing Saddles is, even at that time when it came out in 1974, you know, you still had a lot of people with that mindset. And I'd probably even say you still have a few people of that mindset today, you know, where it's like anytime you get a black anything, you know, it always gets some shit, you know. But then like motherfuckers actually do shit, and it's like, oh, I guess it's all right, you know, type shit. And the townsfolk and Blazing Saddles is fucking great. It's like Robin Hood Men in Tights, shit don't really go anywhere. Like, the movie ends, the Blazing Saddles ends, and everything's kind of like, you know, wrapped up and everything. It's just kind of, it didn't even really like have a good like end credit sequence, you know, where it's like started out doing that and then it goes into some other fucking bullshit, ends on a lame ass joke where it's like, the funny that the Blazing said they're riding off into the sunset in a fucking limo, you know. Like I said, it's Blazing Saddles. 47-40. 70s are up by 7. You know, if I said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. You know, this is I'm trying to satisfy my own curiosity. You know, maybe I had been right all this time. The 70s is the greatest decade of all time, but we still got a lot of boogieing to do before we come to a final conclusion on that, you know, because it'll be, who knows how fucking high the score is going to go. It is just going to be a journey, you know, because I got to know and I got to prove it. And if I'm proven wrong, that'll be even crazier. But they're up by, the 70s are up by 7 now, so it's looking like I was pretty fucking right. So stay tuned for all kinds of shit. You know, the next main event we got is Kelly's Heroes versus Three Kings. So that should be exciting. You know, we'll see all these bonus rounds pop up because, like I said, I got to know. And I can't wait. So get ready for that.